So before we get started, I'm going to go ahead and put up polling question number 1. We will have a total of 5 polling questions during the course of the webinar. This first polling question will help us to indicate that you were here at the beginning. And then we'll have the 3 normal polling questions that you're used to seeing in the middle of a presentation. And then we'll have a 5th polling question at the very end of the webinar to indicate the closure of your attendance time. So up on your screen right now is polling question number 1. Please take a moment to answer our opening polling question. So again, if you're just joining us, please take a moment to answer polling question number 1. This will enable us to track that you were here at the very beginning of the webinar. So again, please take a moment to answer polling question number 1. So if you're just joining us here at the top of the hour, please take a moment to answer polling question number 1. This will let us know that you were here at the very beginning of the presentation. I'm going to be leaving this up for another 30 seconds. So please take a moment to answer polling question number 1 so that we have a indication that you were here at the beginning of the presentation. I'll leave this up for another 15 seconds or so. Another 10 seconds for polling question number 1. Please take a moment to answer this before we get started. So again, answer polling question number 1 so that we have an indication you were here at the very beginning of the presentation. So I'm going to take polling question number 1 down here in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to the CPEsuite.com webinar on individual wage and income information returns. My name is Jason Bowman. I'm an enrolled agent specializing in tax resolution. And our webinar today is sponsored by Gusto, formerly Zen Payroll. Today on the webinar, we happen to have Jake from Gusto. Jake, I'd like to give you a moment to introduce yourself and Gusto.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. Definitely appreciate it. Definitely a pleasure to be here. Always fun working with you and your team over at CPE Suite. Definitely appreciate you partnering with us for this webinar. Clearly happy to be here. In terms of who I am, just kind of set the stage. My name is Jake Hafner. I'm a California CPA. I work here at Gusto, again, formerly Zen Payroll, on our partner advising team. So I work with accountants, people in a position to either offer payroll or work with clients for in payroll with some capacity. And so I spend most of my day working with clients and different partners and helping them determine how it makes the most sense in terms of being most efficient with payroll and how that works with their practice. So who is Gusto? We are a full-service payroll, benefits, and workers' comp provider. We are on a mission to help companies put people first. We currently work with over 2,000 different accounting firms across the nation, including 50% of the CPA practice advisors 40 under 40, and we are also working with tens of thousands of small businesses. So you can see this up on the slide here. Last year we won CPA Practice Advisors 2015 Reader's Choice Award. We're definitely on a mission to really change the whole ecosystem, and happy to be here again today to give you guys a little more information.
Thanks, Jake. I appreciate that. Let's go ahead now and jump into our course objectives. We're going to start by taking a look at the W-2 and W-3 filing requirements. Later on, we'll take a look at the 1099 miscellaneous filing requirements. Before that, we'll take a kind of a big picture overview of information returns in general terms. We're going to specifically be talking today about penalties that are incurred for failing to file information returns. And at the end, we're going to take a look at the applicability of wage and income transcripts from a tax debt resolution perspective. So we're going to cover the filing requirements, the general types of information returns that need to be filed, the penalties for those, and then once those are filed, what we can do with them when representing a client. So let's start by taking a rapid overview of information returns in general. What are information returns? Well, third-party information reporting is for the explicit purpose of increasing voluntary compliance. Obviously, we have a voluntary compliance system when it comes to taxes in this country. And the biggest task that the IRS has is to maximize that voluntary compliance. So more than anything else, information returns are a compliance promotion tool. Compliance is just one aspect, though. When it comes to actually collecting revenue, information returns help the government to actually collect on the tax. It enables them to determine what a taxpayer should have reported. So because of the information matching that occurs on both the individual and the business side in the IRS computer systems, the government can determine, for example, when a taxpayer is not including all of the income that they should be including. It helps them to single people and businesses out for compliance audits. The majority of the CP 2000 correspondence audits that are conducted, the vast majority of those return examinations are based on either a difference in the forms that are reported on a return versus what the IRS receives in the way of information returns, or a discrepancy between what the taxpayer reports in terms of a number and what the number shows up on the information return. So that is the big takeaway that you should leave here with regarding information returns. It is a collections and compliance enforcement tool. Now, if a taxpayer fails to file a return, the IRS will use that information in order to prepare returns on behalf of the taxpayer. The substitute for returns are one of the things that we often have to look for when we are representing a taxpayer. We have to make sure that the SFR is accurate. The vast majority of the time, obviously, they are not. Therefore, we have to use wage and income transcripts, like we'll talk about later, in order to prepare a more accurate return that accurately reflects the taxpayer's situation. Because SFRs are very, very rarely correct. Here you'll see a wide variety of the different types of information returns that exist. Now, in the scope of the hour that we have together, we cannot possibly cover all of these. But I just wanted to put this slide up here because it reflects the complexity of the information return environment. So there's a lot of potential moving pieces that a taxpayer's situation can have based on the type of information returns that they have. Now, note that this slide, it doesn't even include some other types of information returns. For example, K1s. You don't see K1s on this list. So really, this just kind of scratches the surface on the potential information returns a taxpayer may have coming to them. I think it's interesting to point out that information returns themselves are potentially subject to examination. You don't hear about this as much as you do, obviously, as 1040 examination or 941 examination. But the fact is that 1099s, W-2, these are themselves, they have their own entire arena of examination. The rate is extremely low, but they do exist. These examinations are limited in scope. So, for example, if an employer is notified that they are going to be subject to an information return examination, it is by procedure at the IRS, it is limited in scope only to the information returns. A lot of taxpayers fear that when they get this kind of a situation, it's going to blow up into a 941 examination, a 940 examination, an 1120S examination, something of a much bigger scope and nature, a much scarier scenario. But the fact of the matter is that if there is an information return examination, it is limited in scope only to the information returns. This brings us to polling question number 2. So polling question number 2, I'm going to put this up on the screen here. And please be sure to vote. Polling question number 2. Please enter your vote. I will leave this on the screen for a total of 1 minute. 1 minute only. So about halfway there. Please be sure to enter your vote. Wrapping up polling question number 2. Wrapping up polling question number 2. In 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right. Let's keep on going. So let's talk about W-2s and W-3s. First of all, who must file a W-2? So whenever you make a payment, be it in the form of cash or property, of more than $600 to anybody that meets the definition of an employee. Okay, so this is not independent contractors. This is not corporate entities that you do business with. These are employees only. So anytime that exceeds $600 for a tax year, you have to issue them a W-2. I'm sorry, for a calendar year, you have to issue them a W-2. Don't forget, all individuals are, by definition, calendar year taxpayers. But even if you don't hit that $600 threshold, there's a couple other situations where you have to issue a W-2 to anybody. And that is any employee for whom income tax, Social Security, or Medicare was withheld. So if you had an employee that you paid, $50 to because they only worked for you for half a day, but you took out $1 in income tax withholding, then you have to file a W-2 for them. Also, if an employee would have had income tax withheld But because they claimed more than one withholding allowance, or they claimed an exemption on their W-4, and therefore you did not withhold any income tax, then you still have to issue them a W-2. So any employee for whom income tax would have been withheld, but for the fact that they claimed exemption from withholding, or they claimed more than one withholding allowance on their W-4, you have to issue them a W-2, regardless of how much you paid them in wages. Also, want to point out, you must e-file if you have more than 250 W-2s to file. Although, personally, I would simply suggest that you e-file even if you only have one. It simply makes life a lot easier. So let's talk about due dates for W-2s. If you are filing a W-2 on paper, it is usually due on February 28th. In 2016, we've got a leap year, so you get an extra day, and the information returns are not due until February 29th. Now, if you are e-filing these W-2s with their W-3, you get an extra month, and they are not due until March 31st. If you expect not to be able to file them on time or just don't want to deal with it, then you can file a Form 8809 to request a 30-day extension. The Form 8809 must be filed before the normal due date of the returns. So, in other words, if you file Form 8809 anytime during the month of March in order to request an extension of time to file the W-2s, you are locking yourself in to filing them electronically because you are already past the due date for being able to file a paper W-2. Now, also keep in mind that all employers, regardless of extensions, must provide copies of W-2s to the employees no later than February 1st, because obviously employees need to go file their own returns. So let's talk about penalties for failing to file W-2s. This is covered under Internal Revenue Code section 6721. There are the same penalties apply regardless of which of these buckets you fall into. So, for example, the failure to file on time incurs the exact same penalty as the failure to report a taxpayer ID number. So you can be penalized for the failure to file on time, the failure to include all required information, the failure to e-file when you are required to do so, the failure to file machine-readable forms if you're doing these on paper, the failure to report a taxpayer ID number, or the failure to report a correction when you have incorrect information on a W-2. All of these can incur penalties. Now, what exactly are the penalties? These can get pretty stiff pretty quick if you have a lot of employees. Under IRC 6721, the penalty is based on when you actually file. So if you file the W-2 or if you file the correction within 30 days of the original due date, then the penalty is only $30 per W-2. This situation has a max of $250,000 in total penalties for a calendar year. That number is reduced to $75,000 cap if they meet the definition of a small business, which we'll talk about here in a second. The penalty is $60 per W-2 if the W-2s are filed or corrected greater than 30 days after the due date, but no later than August 1st. And the caps here are $500,000 or $200,000 for a small business. The penalty is $100 per W-2 if it is filed or corrected after August 1st. And this penalty has a max of $1.5 million per calendar year, or $500,000 for a small business. So in other words, if you have a lot of employees, obviously this is for a really large company, but they fail to file all of their W-2s until, say, August 2nd, then the max penalty that the business can incur is $1.5 million total for the entire year, or $500,000 if they qualify as a small business. IRC 6722 has other penalties. These are specifically for failure to issue a copy of the W-2 to the employees. Remember, the W-2s have to be provided to employees no later than February 1st. The same penalty due dates, the 30-day periods and the August 1st period, and the same penalty amounts apply for failure to issue a W-2 to an employee as they do for failure to file W-2s or corrected W-2s with the IRS. But there's also an intentional disregard penalty. For an individual or business that knows they're required to file a W-2 on behalf of an employee, but they knowingly choose not to do so at all, there is a $250 penalty per W-2, and there is no maximum penalty. So for a really big business that fails to file W-2s and it can be proven, the IRS can prove that they did so with intentional disregard, then that penalty has no cap. What is the definition of a small business for purposes of W-2 penalty purposes? The IRS looks at a 3-year look-back period and averages the annual gross receipts during those 3 years. And it's for the 3 years ending the calendar year in which the W-2s in question are being discussed. So if we're talking about 2015 W-2s, we're talking about 2013, 14, and 15 are the 3 years that the IRS is going to look at. So if the average annual gross receipts for those 3 years is $3 million per year or less, then the reduced penalty rates can be applied to the taxpayer. Really brief mention here for Form W-3. Form W-3 obviously is the summary and reconciliation of the W-2s. You have to file a W-3 even if you are only filing one W-2. So even if there's only one single solitary lonely W-2 that has to be reconciled against itself, I guess, then you still have to file the W-3. And a special mention here for household employees. If you have household employees that you're required to file a W-2 for, then you still need to file the W-3. This is something that a lot of people with household employees skip over. Okay, a lot of them fail to file the W-2, but they also fail to file the W-3. This is one of the benefits of using an electronic filing service, because if they file the W-2 for you, they're all also going to file the W-3 on your behalf. Now this brings us to polling question number 3. I'll put this up on the screen here for a minute. So go ahead and answer polling question number 3, please. Leave this up on the screen for about 40 more seconds. Please enter your answer for polling question number 3. About 20 more seconds or so here to get your answer in. So again, if you are here for continuing education credit, then you do need to be answering these polling questions. So I'll be taking this one down in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and she be gone. So a quick question for you, Jake. How does Gusto help with managing all of these responsibilities that employers have?
Yeah, definitely, Jason. Gusto, really at the core of our service, it's definitely helping employers manage those responsibilities in many, many different ways. Just to name a few, we automatically generate and file all new hire paperwork. So when an employer hires a new employee, there are many different rules for each state in terms of filing that new hire paperwork. We automatically do that on the back end every time you add a new employee to our system. Same goes with contractors. There's a number of contractors out there, a number of contractor regulations that require the reporting of new contractors as well. If you add a contractor to our system, if a state requires that, we will also report that directly with them. In terms of the different payroll tax codes out there, there are 18,000 across the country. It comes down to local, state, federal requirements. In our system, just by putting in the company locations that you work in and the employer addresses such as or the employee address of their home and work locations, we actually use our system and the geolocation technology to determine which payroll tax jurisdictional requirements you need to follow as an employer. And so we will automatically let you know which one of those that fall and are applicable to you in your business. And so we'll actually help you and lead you in the right direction and make sure that those things are all handled appropriately. We also help and calculate all the different tax amounts that you need to pay that goes along with each of those jurisdictional requirements. So we'll calculate that just based on the payroll data that you put into our system. And then once those are calculated and once those are determined, we will actually automatically generate and file all of those quarterly and annual returns again, whether we're talking about 940s, 941s, all that different stuff. We'll do that all automatically for you. Again, it depends on the local and state requirements. There's a lot that goes into it, and our system automatically determines those and file those on your behalf. And now the best thing about that, after we've done all of those filings and all those calculations, you can actually always access all the different forms that we file directly from your Gusto account just by logging in and pulling that from the forms section. So you always have that online repository there available. You always have that information at your fingertips in case you ever do need to provide that documentation to any kind of IRS agency or whatnot in the future. So definitely helping many, many different things. At the end of the day, if you ever have any questions as well, all our customers have access to our great customer care team here. And so the necessary support whenever you're confused or have questions is always available to make things a little bit more clear.
Awesome, Jake. Thanks for sharing all that. All right, let's take a look at some requirements surrounding Forms 1099 in general. These are things that apply to all Forms 1099, not just a specific Form 1099. So first of all, if 1099 amounts are reported to a taxpayer, but they actually belong to another person, then this is called a nominee recipient. The IRS requires you to file a 1099 of your own, reporting the 1099 amounts to the proper person. If you fail to do this, then the IRS is going to expect that you include in your own income the amounts that are reported on the 1099 to you. So it is important for us as tax professionals to understand that if we have a client that says, oh, this 1099 was issued to me, but the income really belongs to my brother, then it is on us to make sure that a 1099 gets issued to the brother for the same amount. Another thing I want to mention real quick, it's not uncommon, especially in the tax resolution world, for there to be a predecessor business and a successor business. So this can be a part of one of the strategies that we use actually um, to resolve a tax liability. There are specific situations where this is involved. There could also be situations where a business is acquired and we have a predecessor successor issue. So a successor business may assume the 1099 and W-2 reporting requirements of a predecessor business. So all the records from the predecessor company can be carried forward to the successor and reported under the new EIN. In order to take advantage of this, there is a very specific revenue procedure that talks about this, and you have to file a statement with the IRS under Revenue Procedure 99-50. It's also important to point out that Forms 1099 all have the same due dates as W-2 reporting that we talked about earlier. The Form 8809 extension of time to file applies equally to 1099 returns as it does to the W-2s. Also want to point out that, it's not uncommon for us to have a situation for a client where they have one 1099 miscellaneous, for example, that they need to issue. It is perfectly acceptable for those forms to be handwritten. Okay, there's a lot of even practitioners that think that if they get a handwritten form in order to do a return with it, that they can't accept it, and that's false. Handwritten forms are acceptable, but when they're submitted to the IRS, they have to be, you have to handwrite them in block printing only, very carefully, and the whole thing must still be machine readable. If you're going to type on a W-2, to either have it laser printed or with a typewriter and align everything up and put everything in the right boxes, then use a Courier 12-point font for that. But even if they're handwritten, they're acceptable. It just still needs to be machine readable because these are all scanned when they get to the IRS. Also, the same penalties that we talked about earlier that apply to W-2 reporting also apply to 1099 reporting, including the $250 penalty for intentional disregard. So if we tell one of our clients, hey, you need to file this 1099, and they choose not to, I kind of think we have a duty to inform them that, hey, if you don't, you're going to be subject to this $250 intentional disregard penalty per 1099. Let's take a specific look at Form 1099 Miscellaneous. A taxpayer is required to file a Form 1099 Miscellaneous when they have paid $10 or more in royalties, tax-exempt interest, or broker payments in lieu of dividends. This is one of the rules on 1099s that most of us a lot of us probably aren't familiar with. We're much more familiar with the $600 rule. So any taxpayer that pays, any business taxpayer that pays $600 or more in rent, non-employee compensation, prizes, healthcare payments, crop insurance proceeds, cash payments for aquatic life, fishing boat proceeds, payments to attorneys. That's the one that I think is amusing. Or cash from notional principal contracts. These are where we have to always make sure we are looking for this $600 threshold. Only business payments are reportable on a 1099 miscellaneous, not personal payments. So, I am not required to issue a 1099 to Home Depot, for example, because of the $1,200 that I spent there on new flooring. All right, for my personal residence, I'm not required to issue them a 1099. The business aspect, though, the definition there of business use, that includes nonprofit organizations Includes several types of trusts. It includes farm co-ops and payments made by any government agency, federal, state, county, city, or special government entity. Any payments that they make are reportable. Corporate payments are usually not reportable. Like I said, I'm not required to report my flooring in excess of $600 that I paid to Home Depot. But there are exceptions to that. So, for example, fishing. If my business pays more than $600 to a fisherman for fish, then I have to issue a 1099 miscellaneous to that fisherman. Okay, and where I live here in the Seattle area, that's actually not an unlikely scenario for a lot of businesses. Medical payments. If my business directly pays, for example, for the dental work for an employee, then the business has to issue a 1099 to the dental office for those payments. Attorney fees. If my business pays more than $600 in attorney's fees, I've got to issue a 1099 miscellaneous to the attorney. Cash in lieu of dividends, tax-exempt interest, and federal agency payments also fall under this rule, as we talked about earlier. A Form 1096, this is the summary and transmittal form that goes with the majority of the different types of information returns that are out there, including our 1099 miscellaneous forms. What a lot of small businesses, if they're going to issue, say, 2 or 3 1099 miscellaneouses and a few other 1099 or 1098 series or 5498 series returns, a lot of them will unfortunately lump them erroneously onto a single 1096. So it's important that our clients understand that they must complete a Form 1096 for each different type of information return that they're submitting to the IRS. So here's the bottom box on the Form 1096, and these are all the different forms that the Form 1096 transmittal return applies to. So only one of these boxes should be checked for every transmittal. This brings us to polling question number 4. Put that up on the screen here for you. I'll leave this up for the next 45, 50 seconds or so. So please take a moment to vote here on polling question number 4. Again, if you are here for continuing education credit, which I would imagine most of you are, then you must answer the polling questions. Just as a reminder, we will have 5 of them in total on today's presentation. So leave this up for another 10 seconds or so. So be sure to get your vote in. So polling question number 4 is coming down in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Real quick now, let's take a look at wage and income transcripts. Wage and income transcripts are a very valuable tool, particularly when you are doing 1040 tax resolution work. That's about the only time I ever pull wage and income transcripts. And the nice thing about them is that they show all the information returns for a particular TIN. The information returns for a calendar year, especially for an individual taxpayer, these are not going to be complete and accurate until roughly June or July of any given year. So, for example, a 1040, an individual taxpayer's wage and income transcript for 2015 is not going to be complete until July of 2016. And that just has to do with the deadlines for various information returns and the amount of time, obviously, that it takes the IRS to process those. You can use a Form 4506T to obtain a wage and income transcript. You can get them by calling the Practitioner Priority Service or get them on e-services if you have the transcript delivery system access in addition to your regular e-services account. This is what basically the top of one of these looks like. It has the complete employer and employee information, including EIN, if it is a W-2. And this is an example of the information on the bottom of a W-2 wage and income transcript. You can tell whether it's an original or whether it is corrected. It'll give you all the withholding, Social Security, Medicare. If it is a tipped employee, it'll give you allocated tips as well. For somebody that received advanced earned income credit payments, you'll see that on here. And then, as you can see, it'll also have deferred compensation and all the codes. And the very bottom of this is the rest of the codes and their values. So some quick pro tips for when you would want to use a wage and income transcript. First of all, and again, this is relevant all to within the scope of collections representation, primarily for individuals. You can use a wage and income transcript to compare a filed return with the wage and income transcript. This will tell you if anything was missing or if there was something added on the return that shouldn't have been. You can compare taxpayer records against what the IRS has on file, again, for accuracy. A lot of times, especially when we're talking several years past, the IRS can ask for an original return, but the taxpayer may not have records. Not uncommon scenario, unfortunately. So you can use wage and income transcripts to prepare an original return or to replace a substitute for return, because often those SFR returns are grossly inaccurate. So now I'd like to invite Jake to give you all a brief demonstration of some of the really cool features inside of Gusto.
All right, so going to kick things off here, just like going to introduce me to do. I'm going to give you a quick walkthrough of what the Gusto platform looks like, kind of give you guys all a high-level overview and let you see what it looks like in practice. So my screen here that we're looking at is what we refer to as an accountant dashboard. This is the view that if you're an accountant user in our system, so you're either recommending our product to clients of yours or you're actually using our system as the engine behind your payroll service for your clients, you would have this one single login information where you'd be able to see all of your clients from one consolidated place. You'd see all your clients that are currently getting set up, as well as all of your clients that are actually currently up and running payroll with Gusto at the current time. See all the payroll deadlines here on the left. Very simple, easy, clean, simple and easy to follow there. So in order to actually start managing one of your specific clients, all you need to do is simply click on the particular company you want to look at. It takes you into what we now refer to as a single company dashboard. This is the view that any small business would have as soon as they log in. You as an accountant user would be able to click in and manage all of your clients that you actually currently have access to. So a couple things to highlight as we're going through. We've spent a lot of time trying to make payroll, our payroll system, very simple, clean, easy to use, very intuitive. There's a lot of responsibilities that come with payroll that you're clearly listening to now, and we will try to make a lot of those complexities out of sight, out of mind, but also in a way that you understand your responsibilities as well. So the most common thing that you're going to log in and do for any particular client is actually run a payroll. So we're going to highlight that right here up front and center with the to-do items. All you need to do is, intuitively enough, again, click on that to-do item, and we'll take you to this screen here that shows you all of your employees you have set up in the system, whether they're an hourly employee, a salaried employee. In order to update any hours, you just simply click in the box. You can see that the gross pay updates in real time. If you need to add any additional earnings, you just click in the respective box, as you can see here, whatever that might be, paycheck tips, cash tips, all relatively straightforward. You just put in the amounts you'd like into the respective box. If you'd want to control the payment method, you simply use this toggle button, whether that be paying by direct deposit, by check, or skipping a payroll altogether for this particular individual. Something I would highlight is we are a paperless company, so if you did want to pay an employee by check, we do have a check printing tool where you can print out a check on your own and distribute that to that respective employee. I will leave this as a check to kind of show you what that looks like in the overall process of Gusto. So after you've gone through and updated all this information, you would just press save and continue. You do have one last double check for accuracy purposes. You can see that here. We'll highlight everything yellow. Press it one more time. You do have the ability to also track vacation and sick days. This is a screen where for this respective pay period, you would actually update any hours taken for any respective employee. So you simply, again, click in the box, put the number in. It's going to show you the updated remaining balance for that respective employee. Very straightforward. Again, very, very simple. Now, something I would highlight here, we actually have a cool feature where if you actually fall into a jurisdiction where there is an employer responsibility to actually offer a time off policy, a minimum, so a lot of states require that, we have that directly built into our system where we'll actually post a to-do item highlighting that requirement, letting you know what those minimum requirements are, so that way you are fully compliant and meeting those standards based on where you're actually doing business. So another value add, another way to make sure you're running your business properly. After you've updated this, you press save and submit one more time. Our system just takes a few seconds to calculate all the different tax amounts, as well as what I'd mentioned earlier, the different net pay amounts for anyone you indicated needed to be paid by check. So this is a net check that you would need to write and then give to this respective employee. Relatively straightforward. Now, we will still handle all the taxes for this individual. It's just simply the net pay. And that really is leading to the next screen here, which is the review of the payroll we had just run. You can see the summary of all the debits we'll be hitting the employer's bank account for. That includes the total direct deposit, the total employee and employer taxes, as well as any reimbursements that had been processed for this respective pay period. At this point, like I kind of said, we are a full-service payroll provider, and so we're going to debit for these respective amounts, and then we are going to impound all of the taxes for the respective jurisdictions that you need, and we're going to remit those as soon as they're due, as well as make all the respective filings that also need to be made for those respective jurisdictions. So that includes all the quarterly, 940s, 941s, whatever you need, as well as all the local and state requirements. If you ever needed to cancel the payroll, you see something that might be wrong in this, you just press cancel there. Very simple, one click, very easy to do. You can see all more summary here. Very straightforward, very easy to do. Now, a couple other unique features that I always highlight in our system whenever I'm showing it to potential customers or people that wanted to learn more about our system is something that we refer to as autopilot. So you can see that here. What this really is if you have a company that is all direct deposit as well as all salary amounts, all you would need to do is press this button and we'll automatically pay those employees based on the pay schedule we have set up in our system, automatically impound all the taxes, as well as automatically remit all those taxes when they are due. Very straightforward, very easy to do. It really makes payroll out of sight, out of mind. We'll always shoot you an email a day ahead of time before it's going to be processed to make sure that you're fully aware that we are going to be running your payroll, but just know it's one less thing to do on your plate makes payroll just that much easier. Another unique thing that I always highlight, and intuitively enough, if you ever need to manage any employee information, all you need to do is click on the Employees tab here, and you can see all the employee teams that you have set up in our system. But if you need to add a new employee, which is very common to in a payroll system, obviously, you would just add this new employee. You then put in their first name, last name, employee address, as well as the hire date, employee type, amount to pay, and then yes, email the employee requesting their details. And what this will do is actually have our system shoot an email to this employee inviting them to set up the rest of the information we'll need to process payroll for them on their own. And so from an administrator standpoint, it's a huge time-saving tool because this employee will then log in, and historically the administrator would have to key in all of that person's information, their home address, their social security number, their bank information, their W-4 information. Instead, that employee is going to be able to enter that all in themselves. And so that includes putting in their banking routing information for the direct deposit. That includes all of that information, so you don't have to do it as an administrator for that company. And really what this is an extension of is what we call the employee view in our system. And so every employee that is paid through the Gusto system will get their own individual login account for our system as well. And so they can actually manage those details in real time. They can go in here if they move, update their address. If they want to add a second bank account for direct deposit, they have that ability. If they want to change their original bank account for direct deposit, they have that ability as well. They can update their W-4 information. Once you do update that, we'll actually generate an electronic W-4, and that employee actually always has real-time ability to view that right here. And you can see this little note at the top that the W-2 is not ready yet for 2015. And so really what we're saying is once that is available, that W-2, it will be posted right here for that employee to pull electronically online. And so for you as an administrator of the company, you do not have to email that employee their W-2. You don't have to mail that employee their W-2. It's all going to be available online for that employee to pull themselves. It's completely compliant from all regulatory requirements, where you don't have to worry about making sure that employee gets that W-2 because it's directly available from their own individual login portal. Another key thing to keep in mind here is that even if you have a dismissed employee, they're still going to maintain their individual login portal. So from that standpoint, there is a regulatory requirement to make sure you send off that W-2 for any dismissed employee. Now, we make that a lot easier. You don't have to track down that employee's current address or anything like that, even if you might have let them go 9 months ago. You don't have to worry about getting their current address. Instead, if they ever come back to you and say, hey, I never got my W-2, you just say, well, it's always been available online for you to pull from the Gusto system. Just use your email address and password that you got set up a while back.
So thanks again, Jake, for that demo. Definitely appreciate that. One of the things I think is important to mention about Gusto is your really high rate of customer satisfaction. Could you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, no, definitely, Jason. I appreciate that. At the end of the day, payroll is a complex thing. I think a lot of that we talked about today is kind of reiterating that. And so it can be hard to satisfy all of our customers. We've been very fortunate and work really hard to make sure that we put the customers first. We've heavily invested in our customer care team. And so we know that payroll can be complex. As much as we've tried to use software to make things simpler, questions come up still. And so we have a great customer care team here, both in our San Francisco and Denver offices, and they're always available to answer support, or provide valuable support, answer questions. They'll actually communicate directly with any state, local, or even the IRS, state or local agency or the IRS, if there ever to be any kind of questions, and they'll do that communications on your behalf. And so their real goal is to make your life a lot easier. And you can see our NPS rating there. It's a Net Promoter Score. It's a way to measure how happy our customers are. And we take a lot of pride in that. It's one of our key metrics here internally to make sure we're doing a good job. And, I think our customer care team is a big reason for that overall. You can also kind of see here on the screen the different integrations. We do integrate with a number of different software partners that also leads to, happy customers, just in the fact that the software that you're using, whether that be QuickBooks, Xero, and all that sort of thing, we integrate seamlessly with those, so that way any kind of software system you're using, it's all going to play nicely.
Awesome. Really good stuff. Real quick, could you just go over the pricing? There are some folks in the chat that are asking how the pricing works. So could you explain this slide real quick that explains the customer pricing plus the information there on the bottom of the slide that talks about the partner program pricing, kind of how that works?
Yeah, absolutely, Jason. Yeah, definitely. So you can see here, it's just $29 per month per company and $6 per person. What this means is it's a monthly charge. It's not based on the number of times you actually run payroll. You can run payroll as many times as you want. It's really based on that head count. So you just run payroll as many times as you want. It's just a monthly rate that's absolutely all inclusive. There's no quarterly filing fee, no W-2 fee, anything like that. Now you can see there on the bottom the different volume discounts. So you can go back to that account view I touched on, shown earlier. Depending on the number of clients you have, you qualify for a different volume discount. You can see those there. I'm not going to go through the different numbers, but it's pretty straightforward that the more clients you add, the bigger discount you get. We also run promotions from time to time, so definitely check in with us what our current things are going on right now, and we'll give you more information that has to do with our partner program.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jake. I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to be here with us. And thank you again to Gusto, formerly Zen Payroll, for sponsoring today's presentation. If you'd like to learn more about Gusto, please visit gusto.com. That's gusto.com. Or send an email to advisor@gusto.com, or reach out to their team by phone at 1-800-936-0383. Now it's time for polling question number 5. This is our final polling question of the day. So please take a moment and answer the question. I'll leave this up here for about 45 seconds. I know we're tight on time, but please take a moment to answer the polling question so that you can receive your full CPE credit. I'll leave this up for about another 20 seconds or so. All right, polling question number 5 coming down in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Be sure to get your vote in. Stretch out that one. All right, shutting down the poll. So thanks for being with us here today. Definitely appreciate everybody being on. Thank you, Jake from Gusto, for being with us as well. In order to receive your certificate of completion for attending today's webinar, please make sure that you have a complete profile on your account at cpesuite.com. You must have answered all 5 polling questions. That's how we tell that you were here for the entire duration of the webinar. Please do note that if you provide a PTIN in your cpesuite.com account, we will report your hours to the IRS. And all of the polling questions and the attendance tracking, this is obviously all required by IRS regulations and NASBA standards and regulations of nearly every state board of accountancy. So thanks again for being with us. I hope that you have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.